Okay, so have you ever felt like you're drowning in to-dos? Like you're juggling, I don't know, 5 different projects, deadlines are breathing down your neck, and your brain is just like, nope, I'm out of here.
Definitely. That feeling of being overwhelmed is something I think a lot of us can relate to, especially these days.
Right. And, the worst part is that usually we're told to just like hustle harder or push through it. But what if I told you there's a totally different approach? One that says actually feeling good is the key to getting more done.
That's a pretty intriguing concept. I mean, we're so used to thinking that productivity equals, grinding it out.
Exactly. And that's exactly what we're diving into today. We're talking about Ali Abdaal's book, Feel Good Productivity.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about Abdal is he's coming from this place of, being a doctor, dealing with these crazy workloads.
So he knows firsthand about burnout, right?
Oh, absolutely. And he realized at some point that this whole work harder thing wasn't working.
Like trying to put out a fire with gasoline.
Exactly. So that's when he
Yeah.
started exploring these alternative ways to be productive more sustainably. And that's where feel good productivity comes in.
And I'm fascinated by this because it just seems so counterintuitive, right? Like we think we have to force ourselves to be productive.
Right. But Abdal actually uses this really interesting experiment in the book called the candle problem to kind of illustrate this.
So, okay, this whole feel good productivity thing, how does it actually work? Like what's the science behind it?
Well, one of the key concepts that Abdal talked about is this theory called broaden and build. And essentially, it suggests that when we experience positive emotions, it actually broadens our thinking.
Okay, so instead of getting stuck in like a negative thought loop, if we're feeling good, we can see more possibilities, come up with more creative solutions. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. It's like, if you're stressed, you're more likely to have tunnel vision. But when you feel good, you can see the bigger picture, right? You
Right.
can connect the dots more easily.
Oh, that makes sense.
And this broadening then leads to building. So when we feel these positive emotions, we're more likely to build valuable resources, like you said, creativity, resilience, those kinds of things.
So it's like this upward spiral. We feel good, we think better, we get more done, which makes us feel even better.
Precisely. And this isn't just, some feel good mumbo jumbo. There's actual science backing this up.
Oh, really? Like what?
Well, think about those feel good hormones we hear about: dopamine, serotonin.
Right, right.
They actually play a huge role in this. These hormones, they're like little messengers in our brains that impact our energy levels, our motivation, our ability to focus.
Like when you're really into a task, you get in that flow state,
Yeah.
and suddenly like 3 hours have passed, and you're like, wait, where did the time go?
Exactly, you're in the zone. And that's often because those feel-good hormones are firing, keeping you engaged and productive. It's like the difference between, dragging yourself up a hill versus like whooshing down a slide.
Okay, I love that analogy. So if we're feeling good, our brain is primed for productivity, but then, bam, procrastination hits. Suddenly reorganizing your desk drawer seems way more appealing than that big project.
Ugh, procrastination, the ultimate productivity killer. It really is. And we often think of it as like a willpower issue, right? But Abdal argues that a lot of the time we procrastinate because of how a task makes us feel.
So it's not just laziness, it's like these underlying emotions holding us back.
Exactly. He calls them blockers, like these emotional roadblocks that prevent us from getting things done. And he outlines three main ones: uncertainty, fear, and inertia.
Ooh, okay, let's break those down. I think I struggle with all three, honestly.
Yeah, we all do to some extent. Uncertainty is a big one, right? It's that feeling of what if I do it wrong, or what if I make the wrong choice? It can be paralyzing.
Oh, tell me about it. I'm the queen of overthinking.
Yeah.
Like ordering food at a restaurant. Forget it. It takes me like an hour to decide.
I feel you. And that's where this idea of commander's intent comes in handy. It's something Abdal talks about.
Commander's intent, like from the military or something.
Yeah. And it's basically this idea of focusing on the why behind a task.
So instead of getting bogged down in all the details of how to do something, we should take a step back and ask ourselves why we're doing it in the first place.
Exactly. Clarifying the purpose can help us make decisions more easily and reduce that uncertainty. It's like having a compass when you're navigating a new city, right? It gives you direction.
I love that. Having that clear why can make such a difference. Okay, so we've talked about uncertainty, but what about fear? That feeling of what if I fail or I'm not good enough to do this?
Ah, yes. Fear, another big one, it can really hold us back. But Abdal has this really interesting concept for dealing with fear, something he calls the Batman effect.
The Batman effect. Okay, now you've got my attention. I'm intrigued. So, like, Should we all just start wearing capes to work?
Well, not exactly. It's more about creating this confident alter ego, someone who embodies the traits we need to overcome a specific fear. Think of it like a mental power suit.
Okay, I like that. So, for example, if I'm terrified of public speaking, I could channel my inner, I don't know, Michelle Obama, someone who just owns the stage.
Exactly, like stepping into that persona. It's like Adele, she talks about having this alter ego, Sasha Fierce, that helps her overcome stage fright. Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. So basically, we create this more confident version of ourselves, and we can tap into that when we need to face our fears.
Exactly. It's about borrowing that confidence,
Yeah.
even if it feels a little bit pretend at first.
I love it. Okay, last blocker. Inertia. This one gets me every time. It's like that feeling of being glued to the couch when you know you should be working on that project.
Ah, yes, inertia, the siren call of procrastination. It's so easy to get stuck there. But one strategy that Abdal talks about that I find really helpful is the 5-minute rule.
The 5-minute rule, right?
Hmm.
It's like tricking your brain into thinking it's just a small commitment.
Exactly. It's all about that initial hurdle. Once we get started, it's much easier to keep going.
That's like they say, the hardest part is starting. Absolutely. And Ab talks about how this ties into the importance of planning, too. So instead of just saying, oh, I'll get to that later, we actually schedule it in.
Oh, I see. So it's more effective to say, okay, after lunch at 2 p.m., I'm going to work on this for 5 minutes. Is that what you mean?
Exactly. That specificity can make a huge difference because now it's not just about willpower. You have a plan.
That's such a good point.
Hmm.
I'm definitely guilty of being way too vague with my to-do list. No wonder nothing gets done.
We've all been there. But what I appreciate about Abdel's approach is that it's not just about these quick fixes or hacks. He's really talking about building a sustainable system for productivity, one that considers the long term.
Yeah, and a big part of that is avoiding burnout, right?
Mm.
Because we can have all the productivity techniques in the world, but if we're running on fumes, it's not going to last.
Absolutely. Burnout is a real thing, and it can sneak up on you even when you're working on things you're passionate about. Abdal actually uses this really interesting analogy in the book. He talks about LeBron James.
LeBron James. Okay, I did not see that coming. What does LeBron James have to do with burnout?
Well, basketball analysts have observed that one of the keys to LeBron's incredible longevity and success in such a demanding sport is his strategic use of walking.
Walking, like on the court.
Yeah, instead of going full speed all the time, he conserves his energy by strategically slowing down at times. So then, when he needs to, he can really explode into action.
So it's like pacing himself, being smart about his energy, not burning out too quickly.
Exactly. And Abdal ties this back to productivity by saying that we also need to be mindful of our energy levels, knowing when to sprint and when to strategically walk.
That's such a great analogy. It makes perfect sense. And it's not about being lazy. It's about being strategic so you can be effective in the long run.
Right. And on that note, Abdal actually breaks down 3 specific types of burnout and offers solutions for each. We've got overexertion burnout, which is pushing yourself too hard, never saying no.
Oh, I am definitely guilty of that one. Taking on too much, trying to do it all.
And then there's depletion burnout, which stems from just not getting enough rest and recharging.
Okay, that one hits home too. It's like that saying, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Right.
We need to make sure we're taking care of ourselves first.
Exactly. And then finally, there's misalignment burnout, which is when we're working on things that don't align with our values, So it's like we're just going through the motions, but we're not really fulfilled.
Ooh, that's a tough one. Feeling like you're on that treadmill but going nowhere.
It is. And Abdal talks about this interesting exercise, the eulogy method, to help combat that.
The eulogy method? That sounds intense.
It's about imagining your own eulogy. What do you want people to say about you? What kind of impact do you want to have made?
Wow. Okay, yeah, that really puts things into perspective.
It does, right? It forces you to really think about what matters most and make sure your actions are aligned with those values.
I really love that idea. As we wrap up this deep dive, that really resonates with me. That it's not just about checking things off a to-do list. It's about living a life that feels meaningful and fulfilling.
I couldn't agree more. It's about finding that sweet spot where we're productive and we feel good doing it. It's about sustainability and making choices that support our well-being in the long run.
I think that's a great note to end on. It's about more than just getting things done. It's about feeling good while we're doing it. So if you're ready to ditch that hustle harder mentality and try a more sustainable feel-good approach to productivity, definitely check out Ali Abdaal's book. It's given us a lot to think about, and I hope it does the same for you.
Definitely. It's a fresh perspective on a topic that can often feel overwhelming, and hopefully it gives our listeners some practical tools to create more ease and joy in their work.